So Hobbes is going to argue for monarchy and for moral and civil obligations flowing from the power of the monarchy. And how does he do that? Well, his argument in the Leviathan is what's now called a contractarian argument. So what he seeks to do is explain why legal and moral norms have authority on us by grounding them in an implicit or implied contract. And that contract is one to which all the people in society are parties. By participating in society and gaining benefits from it, they implicitly agree to the contract. What sorts of constraints shape the kinds of social contracts that people can actually engage in? Well, Hobbes wants to characterize those constraints in terms of two important elements. And most contractarian theories specify these two elements and talk about how they shape contracts that people can engage in society. So the first element of that is what's called the initial conditions, the way that the world is and the way that agents can operate within that world. The second is rational agency, explication of what motivates agents, how they reason, how they feel, and so on. And those two things together create what we think of as the initial conditions, or for Hobbes, the state of nature. Now, Hobbes starts with the characterization of the motivations of agents who can engage in a social contract, namely rational agents. And he talks about rational agents, as I mentioned, in this very naturalistic way. Human beings are natural objects embedded in the natural world, and their activities are generated by forces, essentially. And he talks about the motivations of human beings as one talks about forces, and talking about how they result in activity by talking about how a force, or talking in ways that are analogous to how a force creates motion in a physical object. And so for him, the beginnings of motion within a body, right, which is how he describes human activity, are called endeavors. And endeavors have two sort of flavors. Endeavors can be directed towards an object, in which case we characterize them as desires, or away from an object, in which case we characterize them as aversions. So for Hobbes, all human activity is generated by these endeavors, either desires or aversions towards objects. Now, when pursuing the objects of their desires and avoiding the objects of their aversions, Hobbes tells us that people are sufficiently endowed in both mental and physical attributes, both to get what they need a lot of the time, but importantly, to ensure that no one is invulnerable. Nor can one person ensure their domination over other people indefinitely. So there's not going to be the emergence of someone that always gets what they want and can impose their will upon the world indefinitely. And Hobbes' primary argument for this is that because there's a plurality of people having a plurality of abilities, people can always join together in different groups to overthrow any group or individual that currently has power. And so for Hobbes, this means that all people are essentially equal. Now, this may seem like a kind of strange idea for someone who's advocating absolute monarchy to have. Right? Monarchs are just people for Hobbes. People are just natural objects embedded in the natural world. This doesn't sound like the sort of thing that you normally associate with advocacy of a monarchical system. And so we get this picture of agents. Agents are going to be largely self-interested individuals. They fear death, they fear an uncertain future, and they have a strong desire for others to recognize their worth. And these individuals are going to have limited affections and benevolence, and their affections and benevolence are going to result largely in partiality towards their immediate family and friends. They're going to exhibit, Hobbes says, an interest in the workings of the world and their environment. They'll differ to some degree in terms of their strengths and their intelligence and other features, but overall, no one will be so well endowed in intelligence or physical strength or beauty and so on, that they can impose their will upon others indefinitely, always get what they want. And so, given that characterization of individuals, Hobbes thinks that there are really three principal causes of quarrel, as he says. Three kinds of causes of conflict between rational agents. And the first is competition. So for Hobbes, the world is a world of relative scarcity. There's never enough for everyone to have as much as they want, and hence people are always, in some degree, in competition with one another for resources. So there's competition. Secondly, there is diffidence. Now, we normally think of diffidence as the lack of confidence in oneself, but Hobbes has the more archaic notion of the term in mind. By diffidence, he really means sort of distrusting individuals. So they're suspicious. They don't trust other people easily. And finally, glory, the desire, right, to be seen by others as being good, great, worthwhile, and so on. And so Hobbes thinks in the pursuit of our desires and the avoidance of our aversions, we fall prey to conflict because of competition over those things, because of our distrust of other people, and because of our desire for other people to see us in this positive light. So his initial condition is called the state of nature. And the initial condition for Hobbes is the condition of humankind, that is how human beings would live and interact, absent any civil authority or constraints of reason. So in the state of nature, each person is going to be pitted against a field of roughly equals. They're going to be driven by self-interest, and they're going to be active in a world that's devoid of property, where every individual is going to struggle to attain all that they can get and struggle to keep it for as long as they can. And sometimes this is characterized as a war of all against all. So Rachel points to four particular sorts of properties that he thinks are crucial in understanding the state of nature. On the one hand, we have an equality of need. So everyone needs basic things like food, shelter, and so on. There's relative scarcity. So there's not enough for everybody to have as much as they want of a lot of things in Hobbes's mind. There's this equality of human power so that no one can indefinitely dominate others and accomplish all their goals consistently. And finally, there's a limited altruism. There is real hard limit on people's ability to identify with, to have sympathetic impulses towards other individuals. And all of these things are accurate descriptions of how Hobbes envisions the state of nature. If we want a description in Hobbes' own words of what the state of nature is like, Rachel quotes it, and I'm quoting it here from the Leviathan. In such a condition, there is no place for industry, because the fruit thereof is uncertain, and consequently no culture of the earth, no navigation, nor use of the commodities that may be imported by sea, no commodious buildings, no instruments of moving or removing such things as require much force, no knowledge of the face of the earth, no account of time, no arts, no letters, no societies, and, which is worst of all, continual fear and danger of violent death, and the life of man, by which he means human beings, solitary, poor, nasty, brutish, and short. So this is Hobbes' own summation of what the state of nature would be like, what humans' lives and interactions with each other would be like absent civil authority and rational constraint.